The world felt darker when Ethan woke up that morning, even though the sun was shining. It was like the light itself had grown weaker, unable to penetrate the heavy fog settling in his mind. He brushed his teeth, went through the motions of a shower, and picked out some clothes, though everything he did felt distant, like he was watching someone else live his life. Ethan used to be a joyful person, or at least he thought he had been. Lately, he couldn't remember what joy even felt like, nor could he recall when the darkness had crept in. It was a gradual thing, a shadow that had stretched over him little by little, until one day he noticed he was engulfed. And so, he had begun his routine of pretending to function. Work, home, repeat. Until one morning, when he left his apartment, he noticed something odd. A letter. It lay neatly on his doorstep, written in strange, slanted handwriting that gave him chills. The note was simple. "Hello, Ethan. I can help you feel better. Meet me at midnight in the forest." He stared at the note, confused and disturbed. Who would leave something like that? A prank? He crumpled it and threw it in the trash before heading to work, trying to forget it even existed. But as the day passed, he couldn't stop thinking about the letter. That night, as he lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling, wrestling with the idea. Midnight, the forest. By 11:30, he found himself pulling on a jacket, grabbing a flashlight, and walking out into the cool night. He didn't know why. He felt silly, even foolish, but the words in the note whispered to him, promising him something he desperately wanted but couldn't name. The forest loomed at the edge of town, dark and wild, shunned by the locals. No one liked to be near it, especially at night. Rumors circulated that strange things happened in those woods. But that night, as Ethan walked into the forest, a strange calm washed over him, as if something was guiding him forward, step by step. The moon shone down between the trees, casting eerie shadows that danced along the ground. Ethan's footsteps crunched on the fallen leaves, and he found himself oddly alert, more so than he'd been in days. His depression, that familiar fog, felt lighter. That alone was enough to keep him going. Eventually, he came to a small clearing where the trees opened up to reveal a lone figure standing in the center. It was a tall man, cloaked in black, his face hidden by a hood. Ethan's heart pounded, and every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he couldn't. Something held him there, binding him to that spot. The man spoke, his voice a deep, hollow whisper that seemed to echo around them. "Ethan, welcome." Ethan swallowed. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I want nothing but to help you, Ethan," the man said, his tone gentle, almost soothing. "I know the darkness that eats at you. I know how it has devoured your joy, your energy, and how you feel as though you're barely existing." Ethan's skin prickled. How do you know that?" The man lifted a hand, pale and bony, pointing toward Ethan. "I can feel it. You wear it like a shroud." Ethan was trembling now, both from fear and the uncanny accuracy of the stranger's words. He hadn't told anyone about how he felt, yet this figure seemed to know every painful detail. The man stepped closer, and Ethan fought the urge to back away. "Wouldn't you like to be free from it, Ethan? Wouldn't you like to feel whole again?" Ethan could barely breathe. The offer hung in the air, wrapping around him, offering hope in a way he hadn't felt in months. I would. More than anything." "Then all you must do," the man continued, his voice a whisper of shadows, "is let me carry that burden for you." Ethan's mind whirled. Could it really be that simple? Just hand over this crushing weight he carried around, let this stranger bear it? But he didn't even know who the man was, or what he wanted in return. "Why?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do this?" The man's smile was obscured in shadow, but Ethan felt it, cold and sinister. "Because I feed on pain, Ethan. I drink the sadness and despair that others pour into me, and when I take it from you, I give you peace in return." Ethan's heart raced. It sounded too good to be true, but as he stared into the shadows of the man's hood, he felt his mind slipping into something calm, something that promised rest from his endless struggle. "What do I have to do?" he whispered. "Just say you accept," the man said softly. "Give me your pain, your sorrow. Offer it freely, and I shall bear it for you." Ethan closed his eyes. He was tired, so tired of fighting. The thought of handing over his agony, his depression, was more tempting than anything he'd ever known. He didn't think twice. "I accept," he said. The words were barely out of his mouth when he felt a strange tugging sensation deep within him. It was as though something invisible was wrapping itself around his heart, sinking into the very core of his being. And then, a sudden rush of release, like a wound draining, and he felt lighter. His shoulders loosened, his mind cleared, and the darkness lifted. He opened his eyes, feeling free. The man had vanished, but Ethan no longer cared. He turned, walking back to his apartment in a daze, his steps lighter than they had been in ages. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed the difference in everything he did. He laughed easily, felt a lightness in his heart, and found himself actually enjoying life. It was as if the world had been remade, each color brighter, each sound sharper. He couldn't remember a time he'd felt so alive. But as the days turned to weeks, strange things started happening. He began to see shadows out of the corner of his eye, flickering just beyond his line of sight. He brushed it off at first, thinking it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But soon the shadows grew bolder, lingering, creeping closer. One night, as he lay in bed, he felt something cold touch his ankle. He jolted upright, only to find himself staring into the pitch-black void of his room. His heart thundered, but nothing was there. Yet, as he settled back down, he could feel it, a weight pressing on him, like the darkness he had felt before, only worse. As the days passed, the shadows became his constant companions, lurking in every corner, whispering to him. He would catch snatches of voices, chilling murmurs that reminded him of his worst moments, his most painful memories. Each day, the shadows grew closer, pressing into his thoughts, into his heart, until he could barely breathe. One night, unable to stand it any longer, he fled back to the forest, hoping, praying that the man would return and take this new horror away. But the forest was empty. He screamed into the night, begging, pleading for the man to come back, but there was no answer. When he turned to leave, he saw a familiar note pinned to a tree. "Once you give me your pain, you can never take it back. But beware, for I do not carry it, I only let it grow." The realization hit him like a gut punch. The man hadn't taken his darkness away. He had only magnified it, feeding off his despair until it grew into something monstrous. Now it was no longer depression, but something far darker, a hunger, a hollow emptiness that was consuming him from the inside. Days passed and Ethan fell deeper into his despair, each night tormented by shadows that whispered his deepest fears. They pressed on him, tightening, suffocating, until he felt himself slipping further than he ever had before. He knew now that he couldn't escape, that he was bound to this darkness forever. And on that final night, as he lay curled up in bed, shivering and broken, he heard the man's voice, soft as silk, echoing in the room. "Welcome back, Ethan. Are you ready to let me carry it once more?" With no strength left, Ethan opened his mouth to scream, but before he could, the darkness swallowed him whole.